Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created for Phase 3. Previously, we worked on adding in support for being able to catch monsters in our game. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be linked in the video descriptions, the source code to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. So previously, when we added in our logic for being able to catch monsters, one of the things we introduced was this sleep function. And the purpose of this function was to allow us to wait a number of milliseconds between different things in our game. And primarily this is being used for our animations right now, where we want to go ahead and have an animation play. We wait a certain number of seconds, and then we go ahead and have something else happen. And a good example of this is in our battle scene. We want to go ahead and have our ball disappear after we pause when we fail to catch an enemy monster. And when I introduced this function, what I did is I went ahead and used the setTimeout method to achieve this functionality. And this can be problematic when you are using animations in your browser, because usually these use the request animation frame. And so there's different timing methods that happen under the hood in our browser. And so this was actually raised as a comment on the video where I introduced this code by Vingus. And so I just want to go ahead and give credit to him for us addressing this issue. And so with the phaser framework, because the built-in update functionality, our game loop relies on the request animation frame, this can cause actually problems and have unintended side effects in our games. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and refactor this function to actually use the built-in phaser timer to achieve similar functionality. And so just some additional information on the issue is both setTimeout and request animation frame are functions that can be used to execute your code after a delay. However, they actually serve different purposes and they're optimized for different scenarios. Primarily, what request animation frame is, that's actually synced with your browser's rendering engine, and it's used to make sure our animations and our visual updates are scheduled between the repaints between our browser's refresh rate. And this is what Phaser uses internally, and typically what most HTML5 frameworks will actually use when we're using our canvas. It just gives us a much better syncing functionality when we do our game updates. And so internally, Phaser's using this for the game loop. And so one thing to know about this is when your game is inactive. So for example, if you are in another tab instead of in your current game tab right now, the browser can actually throttle your game loop. And so this is one of the factors that can cause fluctuations between when your request animation frame callback is actually invoked. And this is where a time delta comes into play, because that's how you would actually check for your updates and then know what you need to update in your game. And so to help avoid this, Phaser will go ahead and smooth out this delta internally, and this will help keep your game running smoothly under different circumstances. On the other hand, what setTimeout does is this uses the internal clock on your computer to go ahead and actually schedule this time event to have it execute after a delay. And so depending on how your game is running, you could get these erratic updates because it's relying on that internal clock. If your browser is slowing down or you're using a lot of resources on your computer, then the delay might not fire when you expect it to. And so typically this is why we'd recommend using request animation frame when you're doing your browser games. It's just much more optimized for these delay calls that we want. And so by relying on the built-in method of the Phaser framework, we can actually utilize that. And so it'll actually make our game much better, and we'll make sure it's optimized for these scenarios. All right, so now we actually have this use our built-in Phaser functionality. What we're going to do is we're just going to replace this with the time delayed call method that we've used previously in our battle scene. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is in our time utils, we'll go ahead and refactor this. And so we'll keep milliseconds as one of our arguments. And the second thing we're going to need is we'll need a reference to our Phaser scene. And then that we can actually get reference to our time and clock plugin. And so what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and add in scene. And then so what we'll do is instead of doing setTimeout, we'll go ahead and just remove this, and we're just going to go ahead and we'll do our scene, let's do time, let's do our delayed call, and now so inside here, we're going to go ahead and use our delay, so we'll pass in our milliseconds. And then what we'll do for our callback is we're just going to go ahead and resolve, and then that way we can use that. So we'll go ahead and save. So now what we'll do is let's jump over to our test scene, and that's where we're currently using sleep. And so we'll just go ahead and make sure that everything works as we expect. All right, and then what we'll need to do is in our test scene, let's go ahead and update our call to our sleep function, and we need to go ahead and pass in our scene. So let's go ahead and we'll go into that reference. So we'll pass in our milliseconds, and now we need to go ahead and pass in our scene. So let's go ahead and pass in this. All right, so one other change I'm going to do is I'm going to change this from 500 to 2000, just so it's very evident that we're waiting before we hide our ball. And then next what I'll do is I'm going to jump over to our preload scene, and I'm going to go ahead and update it. So we start our test scene. And now when our browser reloads, let's go ahead and do our catch animation. We should throw our ball. It should wiggle. And now we should go ahead and wait. And then it disappears and our monster reappears. Very nice. All right, so back in our test scene, I'm going to go ahead and change that back to 500. And now we just need to update our other references. So if we jump to our battle scene, let's go ahead and look for the sleep function. And so what we'll do is we just need to go ahead and pass in our battle scene. And so we'll go ahead and save. All right, so with that change, our code is now optimized to actually use our built-in functionality of Phaser to do our sleep functionality. All right, and just once again, big thanks to Vengas for pointing this out. And so now our code is much more optimized for our game. All right, with that, that brings an end to this video. So as a reminder, there's a link in the video description to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.